So I think there was a small connection problem with the Wi-Fi, but I think it's...
we can hear you, we can hear you. Yes, yes, yes. No.
Yeah. So good afternoon, dear guests. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, a cherished friend of mine, a great scholar, Irene Giviashvili. She is not just one of the leading figures and a prolific scholar in the field of medieval Georgian art and culture, but also a dedicated advocate and frontrunner in conserving and preserving these monuments. She has extensive publications, fieldwork, and teaching expertise as well. Today, she's going to talk us about a subject, I think, on which she dedicated her scholarly research for over 2 decades, and I'm sure we will all enjoy the talk very much. Without further ado, I will leave the floor to Irene, and I will stop sharing my screens. So Irene Giviashvili, Intercultural Dialogue between Byzantium and Georgia. Thank you very much.
Serjan, Luca, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me, and second, for these very touching words. Ankara is a special place. Many of you know that I spent almost 9 years in Ankara. And I have my own life connected with this place and with all of you, and I'm very happy to see the faces. I really miss to have contact with you. I remember quite well when the first ideas to create this Ankara Byzantium, initiated by Serjan many years ago, and then joined by Luca. So unfortunately, I left Ankara at that time, but I'm happy that even pandemics creates for us something positive, so I can be back with you virtually, at least. So this is my connection with the Ankara Byzantium, but in my paper, I will try to link the Georgia-Byzantine relationship and the cultural interchange. So my Serjan's words were exaggerated a little bit. I'm not that super Byzantinist, I would say. My presentation of this kind is first time that I'm trying to bring together this time period of the Georgian Byzantine relationship, and I was very much based on the scholarship existed already. So here, first of all, I want to name the 2 names. So I think Anthony Eastmont needs no my introduction, as all Byzantinists knows his contribution and his publications, like the Royal Imagery of Medieval Georgia, Eastern Approaches, or Tamta's World. But I want also to name my young historian, Sandro Nicolaishvili, who recently got his PhD from Central European University. He's historian, and the title of his dissertation is Byzantium and the Georgian World, Ideology and Kingship and the Rhetoric in the Byzantine Periphery, and he covers the time period of 10th, 12th centuries. So the Georgia Byzantine relations date back to the times of the Constantine the Great, when the King Mirian, Iberian King Mirian, adopted Christian religion about 325. According to ecclesiastical tradition, Georgian church is regarded as an apostolic one. Since at the beginning of Christianization, in the 1st century, Saint Andrew the Apostle and Saint Simon the Zealot and Saint Matthias arrived in Georgia to preach the Christian faith. Narrative sources also attribute the Christianization of Iberia to the Virgin Nino, originally from Cappadocia, who in the early 4th century came to Jerusalem to preach, from Jerusalem to preach in Threta, the capital city of Iberia. Her appearance in Threta occurred during the time of Constantine the Great, who was himself instrumental in supporting the newly converted country with relics, master builders, and many other kinds of assistance. According to Georgian chronicler Leontim Rovelli, after the conversion of Iberia, sorry, I didn't underline that Iberia is the Eastern Georgian name of the Eastern Georgian Kingdom. So conversion of Iberia into Christianity with the preaching of Saint Nino of Cappadocia, King Mirian sent his mission to Constantinople, led by the Bishop Ioane, asking the emperor for the support of the piece of true cross that was recently discovered by Helena, mother of emperor. According to Chronicle, Constantine the Great generously fulfilled the request of King Mirian, providing priests, masons, and holy relics. On the way to Threta, to the capital city of Iberia, mission established few ecclesiastical centers. The first church was built in Eruseti, and the nail of crucifixion was placed here. The other churches were Manglisi and Tsunda, and finally the church in Threta on the sacred place that Georgians already secured with the first and most important relic, the tunic of Christ, which was brought here from the Holy Land by the Jewish Elios, who witnessed the crucifixion and that was buried in Threta. For the first church that was built by King Mirian later in the 4th century, in this particular location, support was received from the Constantine the Great. But the Georgian church remained under the jurisdiction of Antioch and all the East. Georgian church gained its autocephaly, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, autocephaly, during the ecclesiastical reforms that were carried out by the king Vakhtang Gorgasali. So I'm using the 20th century's image of Gorgasali in Tbilisi, in the old city, as he is also founder of our modern capital. The time when Gorgasali gains the power in Eastern Georgia, it marked by an inter-Christian confessional conflict, especially between Diophysites and Monophysites. Armenians recognized the Monophysite faith. Orthodoxy was fought by the Monophysites and followers of other heresies in Byzantium. Byzantium also had great difficulty in foreign policy at this time. It was attacked from different sides and was fighting with Iran on the east. Iran's plan was to keep control over the Caucasus. In 1428, Iran was able to abolish the monarchy in Armenia. Vakhtang, who was married to Iranian Persian princess, was involved in the battles against Byzantium, but changed the geopolitical orientation and future of Georgia at some point. And this shift was justified by his chronicle, by the vision that he had in his dream. So the dream is that he was in Constantinople, accompanied by Saint Nino and Gregory of Nazianzus, who appeared in front, and he appeared in front of the Greek emperor, who was at the time Leo I. and he was crowned by the hands of the emperor, and he promised to fight for the god and in all his future life. And apparently he did so. As a reward, he received the Georgian lands that were under the Byzantine control. And he was also, at the time, Chronicle says that he was also already widowed. So he married the Byzantine princess Helena, and he gained these lands as dowry from Byzantium. So the Georgian church now gained its autocephaly during the ecclesiastical reforms that were carried by Vakhtang Gorgasali. So the Patriarch of Antioch, through the mediation of the Patriarch of Constantinople, consecrated the first Catholicos Peter together with the body of 13 bishops. At this time, during the Vakhtang's reforms, the Georgian monastery, the first ever Georgian monastery, was founded in Opisa, which is in modern Artvin region. Also, the first episcopal see in Achisa, foundation of first episcopal see of Achisa is attested to Vakhtang Gorgasali. From now, the Georgian state and its integral body, the Georgian church, turned its face towards the Byzantium, and the Ophizitis was accepted as an official ideology. This move resulted in the schism between the Georgian and Armenian churches, which happened at the beginning of the 7th century. Political orientation towards Byzantium was not changed even under the Arab domination, which started from the second half of the 7th century. As a result, in the beginning of the 9th century, the Aristabari of Kartli, Ashot Bagrationi, left Tbilisi and moved to the periphery, to the bordering Byzantine lands, to the southwestern provinces, the so-called Tauklarjeti, which is, many of you may know, that are the principalities, that historic Georgian principalities that correspond to modern day Artvin, Ardahan, and part of Erzurum regions. Establishing a new principality of Kartvelians, the kingdom of Georgians, with its royal seat in Artanuji, also founded by King Vakhtang. And you see the image of Artanuji in the modern town of Artanuji. The fortified city was chosen as it stood on the important trade route connecting the Georgian lands with Armenia, Syria, and Byzantium. The administrado accentuates the economic and strategic importance of the city and characterizes it as a key in the region. The move was not spontaneous. It can be interpreted as a well-planned project by the Byzantine Empire that was in need of possessing ally states in the Caucasus, located right on the frontiers of the Arab threat. Family branches of Bagratids, the Bagratunians in Armenia and Bagratians in Georgia, were chosen for this task. The Constantinopolitan imperial court supported the states in favor of common interest. The Georgian Bagratians, on one hand, considered themselves descendants of biblical David. On the other hand, secured Byzantine titles of Kurapalats and interfered in the life of Constantinopolitan imperial court, sometimes successfully, but sometimes fatally. The migration of Bagrationi family was preceded by internal and external migration of the ecclesiastical fathers. The development of monasticism in Georgia is connected with two holy fathers who acted in 8th-9th centuries, establishing a number of new monasteries and restoring old ones. Saint Gregory established himself with the kingdom of Kartvelians in Tauclargeti, and with royal support, strong royal support, was responsible for the foundation of 12 monasteries in Klargeti, bordering Byzantium. On the other hand, Saint Hilarion the Georgian, Hilarion Kartveli, was from Kakheti, which is the easternmost part of Georgia. He was instrumental in bringing monasticism in a different level. Here it should be mentioned that from the end of the 9th century, Constantinople became a place as equally sacred as holy and holy as Jerusalem. Through the witness of the lives of these two fathers, we can learn about their activities and also about their pilgrimages to the Byzantine world. So Hilarion, who spent his prolific life in different monasteries in Kakheti, in Georgia, in Jerusalem, Constantinople, Bithynia, and Thessaloniki. So he spent 5 years on Mount Olympus, and then he went to Constantinople, and the Vita tells us that with his disciples went to the royal city to venerate the true cross and visit all the holy churches. And when he entered Constantinople, he kissed the true cross and signed relics. To his name is attributed the establishment of the first Georgian monastery in Constantinople, Romana Monastery. This, the Vita, his narrative, was composed in the 9th century, presumably originally in Greek, but survived only in 11th century metaphrastic version from Iviron Monastery. Romana was founded by disciples of Hilarion Kartveli with the help and support of imperial court and Emperor Basilius I himself. By the wish of Emperor, Hilarion's holy relics were brought to Constantinople, and he personally placed them inside the Georgian monastery. It has to be underlined that if we believe the author of the Vita, Basilius was so impressed by the knowledge of the Georgian monks that he brought his 2 sons, Leo and Alexander, to them and said, "Holy fathers, please pray for them and teach them books and your language, Georgian." During his life, Hilarion returned home only once. And it happened after his vision of Virgin Mary. On his arrival, he donated all his wealth he inherited from his parents to the monasteries he grew and to the new ones he established for his mother and sister. And he left for good and never came back. Kakheti region, that is located in the easternmost part of eastern Georgia, is most remote from the Byzantine lands. What is striking is that the most Byzantinization of the architecture can be seen in this region. This unusual phenomena became a subject for speculations that the Greek master masons were called to Kakheti to build churches. Observing and studying the architecture of Kakheti a few years ago, together with my good colleague and fellow Marcus Bogish, we came to the conclusion that the Byzantine features in Kakheti appear for one reason. Kakhetians are on the pilgrimage to Constantinople to venerate the holy relics of their fellow Holy Father. The interior rendering of Vachnadziani Relazminda, the number of galleries, narthexes, the dome, the pendatives supporting the dome, and the opus mixtum technique, also the triapsial side chambers, and the opus mixtum technique in Sanagiri Church can be explained by the intensive relations that monasteries among the monasteries related to Hilarion's name, here in Kakheti and in Constantinople. For this constant relationship between Georgia and Romana monastery, one argument can be brought. It is in the 12th century when King Tamar orders a copy of a manuscript to Scriptorium of Romana, where the beautiful Vani Gospel was copied by the Georgian scribe Ioanne and adorned with gold by the Greek master Michael. The next chapter of the Georgia-Byzantine relations is marked by the King David the Kuropalates. David appeared in history as a person who brought Georgian state closer to Byzantium, at the same time he is the one who established untrustful relationship between the allies. At the mid-10th century, monastic life was flourishing, and Tauklarjeti kingdom was already a center of political and cultural life of the whole country, divided in several other small kingdoms of Kartli, Kakheti, Abkhazia, etc. The Glarjeti kingdom itself was divided into Glarjeti and Tau, each ruled by the branches of Bagrationi family. From the second part of the 10th century, Tau branch was deleted. Is it okay? Oh, I hear some noise. So Tau was ruled by David the Kuropalates, who altered Georgian history with his diplomatic, military, political, economic, educational, and cultural achievements. He was holding the Byzantine title of Kuropalates and also was regarded as King of Kings. He was described as the Kuropalates of the whole East, and was responsible for the I'm sorry. Can we unmute? Do you hear this? Or it's just me?
No, I hear it and I try to mute it, but it doesn't work. I mute it twice, and I keep on muting it himself. I don't know why. Okay, now it should work. Sorry about that.
Oh no, sorry. So David brought his kingdom closer to Byzantium. When I say, I want to underline that he was David was responsible for minting the Georgian currency of the same value as the Byzantine one, with the Georgian king insignia, which unified the country with the same monetary system with the Byzantium. So he was greatly respected at the court of Constantinople as an important ally of the Byzantine Empire against Arab domination. First as a military supporter of Nicephorus Phocas and later of Basil II against the rebellious Barda Sclerus. The fact that David's army, led by Tornike, a monk and military commander, took a crucial role in securing this throne for the young Basil was retold in several Georgian, Armenian, and Greek sources. For the successful military campaign, David was rewarded. He was elevated on the Korapalatus rank and received the vast territories into his possession. So this made him as one of the most authoritative and influential rulers in the Caucasus. The representation of David in several portraits sculptured for the church of Oshki his portrait together with his brother Bagrat, and they are both clad in the rich Byzantine clothes, praying to Mother of God or to John the Baptist, respectively. In one case, on a stela, he is portrayed a half figure in orange pose below the Nicopoeia Virgin Mary. Nicopoeia icon of the Virgin, as you all know, was the war palladium for the court of Constantinople. By using the same iconography, David shares and shows his responsibility with the Byzantium on one hand, and on the other hand, he stresses his identity as a descendant of biblical house of David and therefore related to the Virgin. Even more, according to ecclesiastical tradition, Georgia casted lots to Virgin Mary. So David's ambitions were bigger. He was a mastermind behind the unification of Georgia. By adopting the prince Bagrat, who from father's side inherited parts of Georgian Kingdom and from the mother's side, Western Georgia, Abkhazia, and part of Kartli. His works can be traced in the monasteries established within his kingdom, marked the borders with large borders of his kingdom, like Hachuli, Oshkip, Archali, Otkta Ecclesia, Ishkhani, and many others. Also Greece, on Mount Athos, in Cyprus, and in Northern Caucasus. But the next political decision or miscalculation for David was fatal. This time, David supported rebellious Barda Phocas against the Basil II. Basil never abdicated David with the Byzantine title, but left the upper Tau to the Georgian Kingdom only for David's lifetime. Discussing the cultural impact that Georgia gained from the David's politics is the process of adoption of the Constantinopolitan liturgical rite. The process was gradual and it is linked to Mount Athos, to the Georgian Monastery, Iviron, which was established on the Holy Mount in about 1983, with the wealth and support of Byzantine court David received by the wishes of his military commander and monk Ioane Tornike. Here I want to mention that Emperor Basilios allowed the Georgians to establish their monastery on Athos, but this was not as easy as it is described in Georgian hagiographical texts. Basilis II, on reciprocity, requested back the Georgian monastery of Romana, which we just mentioned, connected with Iviron Monastery. So after the establishment of Iviron Monastery, the center of literary, theological, and translation activities shifted from Palestine to Byzantium. According to Corneli Kekelidze, the Athonite Iviron Lavra became the source from which new, fresh current of liturgical life poured into Georgia. Iviron Monastery shortly became an important destination for spiritual and educational purposes. The leading school of translation was created on Athos, and the monks were called from different parts of Georgia. Also, 80 orphans were brought to be raised as men of knowledge. The Athonite literary movement was reached its zenith in the period of Saint Euthymius and later of Saint Georgi. The Vita of Ioane Euthymius gives us an insight. So Euthymius was raised in Constantinople at the imperial court as a political hostage. So the children from the noble families were taken from Tauklarjeti to the imperial court to secure their loyalty. So this gave Ilarion an opportunity to be well educated in Greek. This knowledge he used to translate books that enriched his country, as many were sent from Mount Athos to Tau, to King David. He was responsible for collection of the short version of Synaxarion, including the lives of Georgian saints. Euthymius translated also from Georgian to Greek, and among other prominent contributions is his translation of Barlaam and Josaphat, that is the Christianized story of Buddha, that was also included in the metaphrastic Synaxarion. Now shortly about the architecture on Mount Athos. So it is well known that the only architectural type established on Mount Athos is a triconch. Simultaneously, it is widely recognized that the original church of the Athanasius Catholicon gained its apsis, the triconch apsis, later on. Paul Milona suggested that original Catholicon of Iveron was also an inscribed cross-type building, and later the apses were added during the renovation in 1029. On the other hand, Maria Fala Castelfranchi, the Italian scholar, states that the triconch type was brought to Athos by Georgian monks. Triconch in Georgia had a tradition at least from 8th, 9th centuries. The most celebrated monastic church building of this type is Oshki, the church of Saint John the Baptist. It is the same Oshki where the portraits of Bagrationi brothers were cut in stone and painted in frescoes, which I was showing above. The Oshki monastery stands on the ground donated by the Saint John Tornike, who was instrumental in foundation of the Iviron Monastery. The construction of Oshki Church started in the day of Annunciation in 1963, and it lasted, as it is inscribed in several inscriptions, and it lasted 10 years. By that time, the Georgians establishment by the time when Georgians established themselves on Athos, initiated by the same donors, Oshki already existed. It was the ideal architectural building for the monastic community. So what makes it ideal is that the three-conch space is enlarged by the erection of 4 freestanding pillars to support the dome. This gives the space extra possibility. It gives the architects the possibility to enlarge the space also to the northern and southern arms, and these apsidal arms were ideal to house the choir for chanting. So the diffusion of this form beyond Greece, however, is related to the architecture of Mount Athos. Therefore, in his monograph on Athos architecture, Thomas Stephan never believed that Oshki could be a three-conch built before Athos. And he suggested that originally it was a tetraconch, which was changed later into a three-conch. Nevertheless, Oshki is an original structure and innovative in many ways, including the combination of a three-conch and inscribed cross. Consequently, we can assume that the Georgian contribution to Mount Athos architecture was a combination of the three-conch and inscribed cross, the formula that was used in all Athonite churches and also in all cathedrals, in most of the cathedrals of United Georgian Kingdom in Kutaisi and in Alaverdi. Another contribution since Georgians made to Athos was a support of the creation of new Athonite liturgical rite that originated from the Studite Monastery of Constantinople. The Studious Monastery Typicon that formed the basis for the regulations of Athos monasteries has not survived. According to the study of Dirk Krausmüller and Olga Grishenko, the structure and the character of the Los Studios Typicon, this is the title, they were both short and extended versions of Athonite liturgical books. The second, which contained literary works, was created sometimes around 1000 in Lavra, founded by Athanasius the Athonite, while previously there had been another shorter version that presumably defined the basic regulations and which, like the original Studious Monastery regulations, did not survive either. This Athonite version was translated into Georgian by Athonite monks and was filled with the text concerning the Georgian saints. For example, it was the life of Hilarion. I'm sorry. So what is interesting from our view is that Robert Taft has mentioned that the earliest confirmation of the use of studio rule on Mount Athos comes from Iviron. So when and where Athonites took the Studitypikon, adopted it to their own monastic rule, the historical record or literary confirmation is unknown. So I only discovered that in 11th century, Grigol Bagurianiste found one of the Studite books in the library of Bochkovo Monastery. Nevertheless, for architectural historian, architectural and archaeological evidence can be used as a primary source. In the architecture of Oshki and Barkhali, we can observe the organization of the architectural space in correspondence with the liturgical rule, which was regulated by the studite requirement. We can assume that and the need was the access to the pastorphoriums, which were located on the northern side of the sanctuary for the transfer of the gifts. So I can assume that before moving to Athos, the Georgian monks, the Ciordvanelli family, had already copied the typicon, created their own tutorial typicon for their own monasteries, which were Oshki, Otrta Ecclesia, and Parhali, and they have transferred this typicon to Mount Athos. So we have also information that there were copied several manuscripts in Oshki Monastery to be transferred on Mount Athos. So, as for the typicon, it could be that Georgians were, if they were the first to use this typicon on Mount Athos, it should be speculated that they already had kind of a typica in Tau, which they brought with them on Mount Athos, and later it was established on entire Athos mountain and was later translated and incorporated in the Great Synaxarion and brought back to Georgia. And from the 11th century, the whole entire Georgian church follows the only liturgical rite, which is the Constantinopolitan liturgical rite. And these changes, these are the manuscripts copied, and this changes the architectural planning of the churches from this period. If the outer look of the Georgian churches still remains very Georgian and very different from the Byzantine architecture, the Byzantine kind of influence or can be seen in arrangement of the BEMA. So here on this table, you can see the churches built before and after adoption of the Constantinopolitan liturgical rite. And you see the very simple difference. There is this connection between the protheses on the north and the sanctuary. So by this time, when Georgia adopted the unified liturgical rite, the Byzantine liturgical rite, the Georgian kingdom was unified under the King Bagrat III, who was descendant of David IV and who kept a good relationship with Byzantium. So it is clear that Byzantium needed a stronger Georgia, not a competitor, but needed from Georgia a buffer zone, a battlefield to defend its eastern borders from the common enemies. But the Georgian political attitude changed towards Byzantium during the King George I, who regrets Byzantine titles, and all his life he spent in a battle to regain the lands of Upper Tau, lost by the David III. His period reminds me kind of a medal with two faces, with a political and cultural, totally opposite from each other. In time of Georgis' opposition to Byzantium, monastic life on Athos was flourishing under the Georgi the Athonite, who continued Euthymius' legacy. He himself was instrumental in translation and translation. So he translated the among his translations. So you see the images. It was the Grand Synaxarion. So in this period, the relationship with the Georgian and Byzantine monasteries is even more prolific. So here you see the illuminated manuscripts copied in Constantinople. These are the Menanion for the entire year, the acts of the Sixth Ecumenical Council and the works of Theodorus Studite and many others. So the Menania, the Minor Synaxarion, yeah, here it is remarkable manuscript reflecting an intensive creative collaboration between Georgia and Byzantine artists. It has to be mentioned that it is copied by the, it is copied in Istanbul, in Constantinople, sorry. And also the Minor Synaxarion, which was illustrated by the Greek artist. And the Georgian scholar Gayane Ali Giviashvili attributed these miniatures to the manuscript of Greek artists, and she is putting it in comparison with the Menologion of the Vasily II. On the other hand, the tense relationship, the political relationship between Constantinople and Georgia can be seen in the icons of the 11th century. So here you see, these are the 11th century images, icons of Saint George. And in each case, instead of the dragon, the holy warrior is defeating the emperor Diocletian. So this was especially easily understandable for the contemporary viewers or beholders of these icons. And actually, that this was somehow the remark that they had to see in these images, not Diocletian, but the Byzantine Emperor, can be verified by these two images. Here you can see that the Emperor is clad in the red footwear, which is the direct indication that this is the red footwear was a direct indication of the Byzantine emperors who were for peregrinatus, let's say, who were privileged to wear the red. But on the other hand, the Georgian Church keeps its good relationship, on the other hand, with the Byzantium, and even more, it gets a huge amount of donation to Melchizedek, Patriarch, Bishop of Georgia, receives a huge amount of donation to restore the Catholic Sveti Cathedral in Mtskheta. So the political stabilization between Byzantium and Georgia are related to the Queen Mirian, who was the wife of the King George, And after his death, she came on the political stage and actually on a diplomatic mission for almost 30 years as a mother of Bagrat IV. She was responsible to receive from negotiations from the Constantinople to receive a peace treaty for her son, Bagrat IV, the bride, Princess Helena, and also the royal wedding took place in Bana Cathedral, and also the Kurapalatas title. At this time, Bagrat, during the reign of Bagrat, Georgian Kingdom tries to play its own game and even takes control over the Armenian capital of Ani. It happens only for a while, but the chronicles describe it as the Anians' decision to trust the keys of the city to Bagrat's mother, to Mariam, because she was of the Armenian origin. So the Bagrat's relationship with Byzantium was also controversial, and he spent 3 years on the court. And his 5-year-old daughter, Marta, was brought to Constantinople also. So I think I don't have much time to retell the story about Marta, but I have to point out only one episode. So Marta Maria, known in the Byzantine world as Maria of Alania, was a aunt to the Georgian King David, and she was not successful maybe in her own project to make her only son emperor of Byzantium, but was a woman devoted to education and also supporting her nephew. So I want to point out on only one point, which I'm very grateful to my colleague Irene that Marta Mariam ordered Theophylact to create a I'm sorry. I lost the text. To Theophylact the orchid to create the treatise about the errors of the Latins and ecclesiastical matters. So it has to be understood in the historical context that it is the time after the exchange of anathemas between Rome and Constantinople, and defeating the Orthodox doctrinal positions. The treatise is worth of attention as it can be understood in a wider context, in the context of the centuries-old theological oppositions between Georgians and Armenians. It should be noted that this heresy also became active in Byzantium through the coalition of the Syrian and Armenian monophysite churches occurring in the 11th and 12th centuries. What makes this coalition even more serious is that the alliance of the monophysites with the Roman Catholic Church, in spite of doctrinal disagreements.
It's 17 hours.
found in accordance with the liturgical practice of the Eucharist. This treatise had a dual importance in this sense. So Marta Maria came to Georgia only once, looks like, during the death of her father. And maybe she brought some relics with her. And among one of them should be her portrait, which is incorporated in the Hahuli icon. So the next page, which is totally changes the Byzantine-Georgian relations, is related to the King David IV. So according to Sandro Nicolaescu's observations, David, on one hand, David has copied the rulership from the Byzantine rulership of his kingdom, but on the other hand, he is the one who gets rid of the Byzantine shadow. He is the one who regrets the Byzantine titles. He means his own currency, and he plays his own game on the region. So at this time, the Seljuks are on the way. The Battle of Manzikert already happened, and the Byzantine somehow is weakened. On the other hand, the Crusaders on the way. So the David takes this time as advantage for himself, and he creates the kingdom, which is called kind of a Georgian empire. And he is one to have ambitions that he is the second Constantine, and he creates his another monastery, Galati Monastery, which is a new Athens. So talking about the David's relationship with Byzantium, despite this fact that he gets rid of this Byzantine shadow, he uses the Byzantine vocabulary to show his art and architecture. So his monastery is most close, let's say his architecture is most close to the Byzantium, with its very plain facade, and also with the architecture of opus mixtum used in I don't have the image. Also with the mosaics, he's adorning his monastery church. What is important that David brings from Tao, from Hahuli, the icon of Hahuli, which was first triptych, which was first created during the David Kuropalatas times. So the backward of the icon still resembles this period of the 10th century metalwork. Still survives the metalwork, but David, the builder, asks his son in his will to adorn the icon in a new gilded frame. So the gilded frame includes dozens of Byzantine and Georgian enamel works, and all is placed on the background of some kind of a floral ornamentation which resembles the tree of life. So also you can see it on the back. So what took my interest is this small piece of Byzantine enamel work placed directly over the Virgin Mary's image. And here in the image of Constantine and Elena, you can see a small wooden cross inserted in the frame, and it has to be the piece of the true cross, which was so important for David, as he several times mentions in his will that he was serving the true cross, and he leaves the true cross to his son, and this is what makes him the second Constantine. So the question is why David brought the icon, Hahuli icon, to Gelati. To my understanding, which I already shared on the Byzantine Congress in Belgrade years ago, to my understanding, so the frescoes can give the understanding. So you see the images of the king, the royal family, the king, and when you visualize it moving inside the church, the king is placed in front of Constantine and Elena. So he's dedicating this church to Constantine and Elena. And here, in the picture of Yermakov, from 100 years old, before the Hahuli icon was transferred into the museum, you can see its original location. It was located below the frescoes of Constantine and Elena. So I think that the reason, here you can see it again. So here the Constantine Elena, here is the original place, and here stands David the builder. So I think for him it was necessary to have the true cross to whom he dedicated his life, and to, as a reliquary, he built the Bana Cathedral. And also, I can think that this enamel was originally part of the David's icon as the background, which also resembles the living cross, can be found on the back of the here, on the back of the icon, on its wings. And it very much resembles the relief which is in Hahuli, in the small church of the monastery. So in this, here is the burial place of David, and the gravestone reads here, "This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have deserted it." So this is the words from the biblical David's Psalms. And if we read this beginning of this psalm, it reads, "For the Lord has chosen Zion, here has desired it for his habitation." So this is the explanation why the symbol of the universal church is connected with the holy place Zion. It also used as synonym of Jerusalem. So it's clear that Gelati was a second Jerusalem for David. The last section, which I have to be very quick, is the King Tamar. I actually have no time. King Tamar, who continues her story the same way as her great-grandfather. She has created her own empire. She is not depending on the Byzantine anymore, but even more, she is supporting the Byzantine Empire in exile in Trebizond to create the Empire of Trebizond. And even more, she supports development of culture, philosophy, or arts not only within her country or Trapezoin, but also in the lands she's controlling, I mean in Armenia. So if we recall Nikolai Mar, the Armenian culture flourished most during this period, during the 13th century, when it was under the Georgian patronage ruled by the military commanders Zakaria and Ivan Khavzeli. So this is very short. And the last, so the Georgians continued to its relationship with Byzantium at the very late stage. So this is the church of Tsalenjikhan. You can see which was painted by the Greek artist brought from Constantinople. His name was Kirmanuel Evgenikos. The painting was conducted in the years between 1384 and 1394 by Bamer Dadiani. So this is regarded as one of the last paintings which was created by the Byzantine artist. So, and last but not least, which I have omitted, I had to mention that Georgians took from Byzantium also the way of painting the churches, the program covering the entire church by the mural paintings. So this was a very general historical overview between the Georgian and Byzantine cultural, political, or religious relationship. Georgian culture never became Byzantine culture. And when I ask myself, so how and why it kept its own identity, it still remains, it still stays as a question for me. Maybe it was the language. I don't know, because as we can see, Georgia was taking a lot, but always fabricating and bringing it in all own forms. Without Byzantium, the Georgian culture could be very poor, maybe, but yeah, that's all I would love to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so
I was too long.
No. Thank you very much, Irene, for this wonderful talk. It was really a very informative survey covering architecture, monumental art, panel paintings, and also the political and social aspects of the intercultural relationship between Georgia and Byzantium. And now, if there are any questions from the audience, we are ready to have them. You can write on the chat box or ask out loud. So.
There is a long, sorry, Serjan, I just see a long kind of question or comment.
Where? Is it in your?
No, it was sent to me, yes, it was sent to me directly.
Okay. Because I'm not able to see it.
Yes, let me send you.
Yeah, please. You can.
To everyone. Here it is.
Mm-hmm. Okay, are there any Georgian written or visual sources that comes to mind which deal with the issue of NAFTA sources or Byzantine interest in Georgian NAFTA? I shouldn't take other participants' time, my email address, and thanks. So it was the question.
I have no answer, I'm sorry. Maybe my colleagues can help.
So there's an email address if you.
I have to copy this.
Yes. So I'll just.
Do you see my screen again?
No.
Good.
So Ali Doruk.
Yes, I have no answer. I will try to find answer and then write. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mrs. Giviashvili, for your informative and broad presentation and great images. You covered centuries. I've been reading Brose, and it's nice to be able to visualize the sites. So it was a remark on your talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
The same, many thanks for this wonderful presentation. Greetings from Jerusalem. So these are the appreciation and remark words to you, so you can follow.
So if there are any questions, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I think there are no questions. Maybe one would be about the cult of Mary, the early cult of Virgin Mary, and the influence of Georgian texts, texts that are influenced by the Palestine, the late antique and early Byzantine period, the connection between these regions. Do we have any information on that? And reflect on the cult of Virgin Mary, Irene?
I'm not the expert, I'm sorry, on this Virgin iconography, I'm sorry. Maybe, again, I will ask if Nina Chichinadze is around. She could be.
Because I'm just briefly aware of the fact that there were Jewish tradesmen traveling between these two regions and their influence on some of the issues, but it's just my brief information about the topic. So I just wanted to ask if you have more information about this period and the relationship between the Holy Land and Georgia, the agents, yes, the actors.
The connection with the Holy Land and Georgia started from the very period when the Georgia was converted, and the very early liturgical texts of the actually were survived in the Georgian traditions, in the Georgian translations rather than in the original ones, because the Georgian church was following the Jerusalem tradition. So this tradition of translation, liturgical text, and in general translation culture started from the very beginning of the Christianization of the country. But connecting with the Virgin Mary, I have no answer. I can say that from the 12th century, Georgia develops the cycle of the Virgin Mary, and Athenisioni Church is one of the earliest examples where the whole cycle of the life of the Virgin Mary was depicted and illustrated. But yeah, I'll find the answer for you. Yeah,
so
from the 11th century. So sorry, from the 11th century. Athenisioni is the 11th century.
Thank you, Irene. Here comes one question from Humberto. Thank you very much. Was there any reaction on the part of the Georgians to Byzantine attempts at reunification with the Western Church?
To the Western Church, Was there any reaction on the part of the Georgians to Byzantine attempts to unify the Western Church? I think what I was mentioning, this anti-Latin treat was one of the reactions. So, and also Georgia was very defensive against the heresies. Even there was no iconoclasm. What I didn't mention, there was no iconoclasm in Georgia. Yeah, so I'm not the expert in these fields. Sorry. Oh, it's Umberto. Hello, Umberto. My student. I have no answer for my student.
Another question from Sedat Kush. Actually, Georgia was one of the nations that accepted the fate of Jesus. Seems to you lovely. Tell us the Byzantine effects on the Georgian art. I would like to ask about iconoclasm and how it affected the Georgian art. Thank you. So,
well, there was no iconoclasm. There was no iconoclasm, and the Georgians' reaction to this, not reaction, but the story can be brought here, is that in the 8th century, the Goth bishop John was concentrated in Svetichoveli, because in the whole Greece there was no other place to find the Orthodox bishop. So the Georgian also can be it can be in the Byzantine connection. It can be also mentioned the Portaitis icon of the Virgin Mary, which actually after the iconoclasm was placed in the Iviron Monastery. According to the legend, it came exactly to Georgia, so the Georgians were always supporters of the icons, and it was some kind of an how to say, it was some kind of logical to have it in the Georgian monastery of Iviron. So Georgia was always keeping the icons and never refusing it. Yeah, so on this regard, Georgia was totally different from Byzantium.
Yes, I think it's the last question.
Confirm. I cannot see any, and no direct message to me this time.
Yes. So I have my question, but I will write an email, long email to Irene, and maybe we'll have another Zoom in person in the future. Thank you very much for the participation and for our guest speaker today. Next week, we have the continuation of this mini seminar series, and hope you stay safe and sound. We have difficult and challenging times still going on. Luca, would you like to add
Thank you, Irene, very much. Sending you a big kiss from Ankara.
See you next week. Yes. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. And sorry if I was not able to answer for some of your questions. It's a very broad subject. And actually, I challenged myself and accepted this invitation. So thank you.
But we are glad you did it. Glad.
Contrary, actually, I'll just say one thing on that. Now we have the survey and the broader information, so we can articulate it later in the future with other talks, maybe So we have the questions, topics in our minds, and we'll work on it, and we'll send you another invitation. Irene, thank you again. Thank you very much for all your efforts and support. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Ciao.
Ciao.